Our National Museum has caused a national outcry after trying to apply some guidelines aimed at protecting pregnant or menstruating women. Here to talk mana wahine and other issues is Donna Awatere-Huata and Mamae Takerei. Tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora, Jodi. Kia ora, Jodi. Mamae.
Thank you for coming here. Donna, how were you first made aware of this issue about taonga and tapu noa at Te Papa?
Well, you know, it just came across my Facebook. And I think it's like Marae is, Facebook is like the new Marae anyway, so I thought it was quite appropriate. And then I just responded with my own thoughts, and then someone must have picked it up, and next thing I was on Takerei, and now I'm here.
And so what is your view of tapu noa?
Look, firstly, I just got to say, though, Jodi, that we've got to congratulate Te Papa, you know, for at least respecting the kawa, even if, in my view, they didn't quite get it right. The fact of the matter is people like Hema Te Hemera have been giving them good advice most of the time. And, you know, the kind of respect that they are showing to our taonga and that, let's congratulate them. And, you know, what the last thing we all needed was for this thing to be picked up by the pink neck brigade and used as something to flagellate Māori. That's the last thing we need.
Mamae, what is your understanding of tapu noa?
I should be able to understand it very clearly, simply because I was reared, I was born under it, I grew up in it. And like Donna, you know, with regards to the museum and on the marae, there is a certain protocol of kawa that you adhere to. But I also want to reinforce and support the statement made by Donna that if it were not for Māori in museums, the situation could be worse.
What does tapu noa actually mean for people who aren't aware of it or who are not educated about it?
Quite simply, tapu noa, is to simplify it, is that there's to make common noa. Tapu is sacred. If we were to be able to try to explain to everyone out there, it becomes so confusing, because common is noa, and there are certain processes that you use to make something that's sacred or deems to be tapu in Māori terms, noa, to make it common. So there are processes for that. Some
people who may not know anything about what tapu noa means find it could be perceived as flakiness or something that's not quite real. And so who gets to talk about that and explain?
Flakiness is a nice way to describe it, because a lot of people think that Māori culture is very flaky. But it also has a wealth of experience and iconic examples of how we Māori perceive ourselves to be from the cosmology and those deities that create those forms, and from it the humankind begins to respond to it. Is that I don't think there's anything flaky about that. Is that for all that's said and done, is that people need to understand and be aware that Māori culture, in view of noa and tapu, is very precious to us. It's how that whole core that we revolve around, how we begin to teach and educate people to understand it. It's a whole cultural paradigm.
Mama, you said that you were raised with this knowledge, with this tikanga. Donna, some of the commentary about you this week, there's been some of the critics have actually come out saying that you were raised as a Pākehā. Are you fully aware of this tikanga?
Very much so. I mean, I was born and bred at Wahine Pā, as most people know, with my 41st cousins. I was brought up, you know, under the mantle of our marae. And we were brought up to understand those tikanga, but at the same time, our great-great-grandmothers had already made changes. You know, there used to be a time when our whānau would have, when they menstruated or been hapu, they would have sort of gone off into the kouta and snuggled up there and sung a few waiata, and they were relieved of the burden of cooking, hunting for kai, of cleaning, of looking after kids and all of that. And by the time I had come along, in our whānau anyway, for many generations the woman had changed that, and they didn't have the luxury, I suppose, of sort of lying in the kouta and you know, lolling around. And I think that consideration that was given to women in former times because it can be, you know, painful and disturbing. We just don't have the luxury of that anymore. And so I was brought up, on the one hand, you know, at the pa and living with tikanga, but on the other hand having, you know, many aunties and nannies who cooked while they menstruated, who cooked and cleaned and food gathered and worked while they were hapu. So it was kind of like, that's just how we were brought up and how I have 5 daughters, and I want them to be able to live a full life. And I guess on the one hand you have to say great to Papa for raising this issue and being respectful, but on the other hand, let's have not have one situation for when women are the pack horse, when we're cooking and cleaning and working, and have one rule then, and then on another case, you know, where there are taonga involved, somehow we've got to be, you know, all yabu success, get of those unclean women. And there was too much of that sense of women being demonised just for being women.
Yes.
So what exactly are some of the things that either of you have heard about that have happened to women who do breach this tikanga?
Well, you know, I can go back generations, is that for too long that the whole ideology around Awatere is that tikanga is supposed to have been born of that. Is that we see examples for women, like Donna says, is that who's going to cook your food? Who's going to do all the cooking? All those generations before our time. Is that, you know, I didn't know of men who did the cooking then, maybe over an oven preceding 1800s, of course, but however.
Oh, exactly, Mamae.
Yeah.
Now, look, the New Zealand Herald has actually written in Friday's paper an editorial which says, nod to Māori culture, not too much to ask. Now, the Minister of Culture and Heritage had an opportunity to actually tell all of New Zealand about respecting Māori culture, but chose not to do that. What do you think about that?
Well, it's, look, in reality, you keep reiterating, regurgitating, you know, respecting Māori culture. It is the wealth of this country. Without it, now there's a high focus on multiculturalism. But for the fact of the matter is that as the first occupiers of this land, so to speak, they can argue it for all I care. But the fact of the matter is that Māori culture has been taken to the world. It has gone to the 4 corners of the world prior to this whole country becoming multicultural. Is that there's a difference. There's the indigenous culture of the land that belongs to us. And so, yes, those people in the government, they have a duty to enforce and to make sure that our culture is the culture of the land.
Okay, kia ora, Mamae, thank you for that. Do you think he's nervous?
I think
he's
the
afraid?
reason that he hasn't responded is he's nerve-wracked. You know, they just don't know how to respond. It's like John Key when he was with Paul Henry the other day. He's shell-shocked. And I think the Minister of Culture and Heritage is probably shell-shocked because they haven't been on this journey. You know, they've good on them for going into coalition with the Māori Party, but really they're at the start of a long journey for them. And I don't think we can look to them for leadership. I think where we've got to look as Māori women is to our own people. I think this is a debate that we need to be having on our own marae.
Indeed. Just finally, one more question. Do you think the police should be armed?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry to say, more Māori going to be shot dead soon.
What do you think of that, Mamae?
It'll go from one problem to another.
All right then. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the program, me and Scotty. Thank you. Kia ora.